Okay, so people rolling in there now. Welcome to Positive Nights, Positive Afternoon here in Ireland. And we had to come on early because Rebecca's in Australia. So for the time difference, this was the best time to do it. So you're all very welcome. Glad to have you here on the live call. There's people rolling in there now. The plan here today is I'm going to chat to Rebecca for about 45 minutes. And then I'm going to do a Q&A with the audience. So feel free to type your questions into the chat box. We keep everybody on mute because that makes it flow the easiest. So just type your questions in. And after my chat, then we'll go over to your chat then and have a Q&A with Rebecca. And she'll probably channel for that part of the event. Okay? But you're all very, very welcome. Great to have you here. And I'm delighted to have Rebecca Dawson here today. I've just come across her work there recently. And there's so many people on the planet right now doing amazing work in terms of raising consciousness. And Rebecca, you're definitely one of those people. So thank you for doing what you're doing.
Oh, I'm just so delighted that we're coming together in this way at this really important time for the planet.
Yeah, it really feels important. It feels kind of tangible almost, you know. So what I always do at the beginning here is I just have a short meditation that I'm going to do. So I'm going to invite everybody before we start just to drop in to your heart center. Okay. Close your eyes. And feel the transition moving from head, which we kind of associate with thoughts, into heart, which we will move into feeling. So you're moving into that kind of body wisdom and the language of feeling. So just check in with how you're feeling right now. Tune into your emotions. And just take a couple of breaths into your heart center. On the out breath, really feel your body relaxing. And as you tune into this space of feeling, tune into frequency now. And just choose a frequency right now for yourself. Let's pick one for ease. If one pops into your head, just pick that. But pick a frequency that you'd like to inhabit right now. And I'm just going to throw in harmony as one to try for today. So just pick and activate the frequency of harmony within your system now. Harmony within yourself and harmony with the universe. Feel your whole system tuning into harmony. Let that drift off now and just feel that ability within yourself to choose any frequency you wish to inhabit at any time. And now let go of that. And as you listen to the chat this afternoon, I invite you to stay in this space of feeling. Don't feel the need to go into thinking. Don't feel the need to go into judgment. Just go into a space of feeling. And whatever you hear today, take away what resonates and just simply let go of the rest. And when you're ready, open your eyes. And as you open your eyes, feel an inner smile go off in your heart and feel a big smile on your face. Lovely. Okay. I love talking to people like you, Rebecca. It is a blessing to do what I do. You know, I'm sitting here on a Saturday afternoon in Dublin, Ireland, and I get to talk to people like you all the time, and it just blows my mind. I was just thinking about it there, going, this is nuts. You know, recently Lee Harris, Wendy Kennedy, amazing people who are tapping into universal wisdom, channels from all around the world, who are accessing this information to help humanity right now. So we're going to go in a little bit to your backstory, but before we do, we spoke about the title of the event today is Igniting a New Humanity, and that's on your website as well as one of your taglines. What do you feel is going on right now for humanity? Are we moving into a kind of a multi-dimensional space? Is that what you feel is happening?
Well, I think as inherently as humans, we are multidimensional. I mean, that's the nature of our consciousness. But within our reality, as we've been experiencing it, we haven't really been able to experience ourselves much beyond third dimensional. We've been able to experience ourselves as thought and as feeling, as physicality, but we haven't really been able to get beyond that. So what we've been talking about for at least 15 years now through the channelings that the masters have been bringing us is this enormous paradigm shift that we're actually going through right now, which is basically lifting our consciousness out of just being focused in third dimensional reality and bringing us more into awareness of our multidimensionality. So a lot of what we've been talking about is making the shift from 3D to 5D, which is, it's just been so extraordinary for me to see this become more of a common conversation in recent times. To me, that's super exciting because we've been talking about it for so long, and you know, it was so far beyond people's capacity to even think that it was possible that we were having a dimensional or a paradigm shift, and yet here we are, and it's becoming a much more common conversation in spiritual circles or with people who are awakening to their consciousness. So when we talk about a shift from 3D to 5D, we're in essence talking about moving out of a particular type of reality, because every reality has a certain set of mechanics for how things work and laws of reaction and how things come together. And in 3D, we've had circular and repetitive motions of experience. We've had set blueprints, and we've had cause and effect. Linear time, all of these things that we take for granted are really the mechanics of our reality. And as we move into this fifth dimensional reality, consciousness is actually expanding beyond the containment of those kinds of laws, I guess you could say, or mechanics for how reality works. So one of the first things that you notice when you start to go through a paradigm shift is that all the things that used to work for you before don't really seem to work as well anymore. And one of the key things that we started to talk about and notice a long time ago was setting goals and working towards them in a very linear way. A lot of people were finding that wasn't satisfying for them anymore, or having to move or define yourself in one particular direction or one particular role. Having a thought about something and then being able to make a reality out of it, which was a really fantastic way for creation in the 80s and 90s. We really started to get a hold of, you know, your thoughts create your reality. And yet what we were discovering is that those sorts of mechanisms of cause and effect weren't really working so well for us anymore. So as I was, you know, a holistic practitioner and a counselor for many years, I had so many people coming to see me you know, in a clinic setting and saying, well, why is it that all of these, you know, things that used to work for me and these strategies for making life easier are not working anymore? And that was when we really began to ask the questions, what's happening? Are we really losing it? Are we really losing our ability to create? And that's when a lot of the content started to come through from the masters around, well, it's not that when we can't create or manifest as well as we used to. It's that when you have a paradigm shift, the very mechanics of that reality change. And unless you know what the new mechanics are for what we're moving into, you feel like somehow you're failing, or your life's falling apart, or you're not able to do things successfully the way that you used to. And so that's when we started to talk about, well, how does it actually work in fifth dimensional reality, and how are we designed to navigate within that, and what are some of the capacities that we can use, and how do our lives look different? And that's principally what we've been doing for quite a few years now. So this time right now is super exciting, because this is the part where, I mean, in order to have a mass migration of consciousness from one reality to another, there's a certain amount of letting go that's required. But there's also, we know that our human selves and our emotional selves, we get very attached to things. So a huge changeover from one system of reality to another is inevitably going to require a breakdown of sorts before people actually say, well, what else is there? And that's where we are right now. We're actually moving into this peak experience where there's going to be mass breakdown of systems, and a lot of people choosing to walk away from them. And we've been expecting this for a long time. And here we are. So it's pretty exciting.
I was saying that to you before we started. It's so exciting, you know. I mean, there's days where it's very tricky, but there's days where it's so exciting. So what always springs into my mind is the caterpillar butterfly analogy. You know, that we're in that kind of caterpillar stage, and the transformation is so incredibly, it's just so transitional. It's just so transforming. A caterpillar, you know how a caterpillar looks, and you know how a butterfly looks. It's just completely different. You know, it's a completely different world. So I wanted to ask you, when you talk about oneness and unity, and that there is only one being kind of running the whole show here, okay? That we're all part of this oneness. On the planet right now, there's obviously an activation, there's rules, there's restrictions and all that kind of stuff in place. So is one aspect of the oneness provoking the other aspect, when we talk about things like light and dark, into this evolution? I mean, is the thing that seems to be restricting us the thing that's actually helping us shift, if you know what I mean?
Well, it's a little bit like when we have emotional pain and trauma, isn't it? It's, you know, it's an awful thing that we want to release, but it's ultimately brings all of our attention to one space to actually unify ourselves with it, and then we become more conscious. So, and it's such a great question. Thank you for asking it, because there is such a sense of extreme duality at the moment in our world. And really, I mean, duality is the core foundation, really, of third dimensional reality. I mean, that's the containment that we've been living in for so long. So you know that when something's coming to the end of its experience, it peaks. I mean, we see this in nature as well. So what we're seeing at this time is we're seeing an absolute peak of duality just before we transition into a completely new paradigm of existence. And so, yes, if you really have a really good sense for unity consciousness, you can see that our world is designed for duality, or the third dimensional reality has been designed for duality. And what we're seeing now is an incredible sense of duality that's playing itself out. And the way that I like to describe it is that the closer those two aspects come to each other, whether you want to call it light and dark, good or bad, pro or against, for many people, you're coming so face to face with it right now that you can't actually ignore it. You can't avoid it. You can't move away from it. And while, yes, there is a great deal of benefit in sitting in your own consciousness and just tuning out to a lot of fear, there's also something really powerful about being able to look it right in the eye and face it. Because the closer those two aspects of duality come to each other like they are now, they have an opportunity to actually merge. And at that point, that's when we transition as a collective into a completely new reality. So the closer you get to your opposition, the closer we are to becoming way more conscious and shifting into new possibilities. And it's so in your face now. I mean, you can't, it's very difficult to avoid what's happening on the planet, and it's not localized, it's everywhere. I mean, it's absolutely amazing. But the other thing I want to say about that too is duality coming into unity consciousness like that, is that what is the final frontier of consciousness for the human body? I mean, where does consciousness sit for us? Here. It's in our physical form. It's where we go to when we meditate. It's the closest place that we find God, if you will, or consciousness. It's within ourselves. And so what's happening right now with this whole merging of duality, it's all about the human body. It's all about, what do I want to put in it, or what don't I want to put in it? I mean, it's absolute opposition coming together in the human form. Now, if we really believe that the body is the temple, and that it actually is the base of our consciousness, it's our access point for consciousness, there's nothing holier than the human form. If we really believe that, and we look at what's happening now on the planet, we've got competing systems of natural and, say, artificial law, natural and artificial intelligence that appears to be coming together, and it's all around the human form, the human biology. I mean, I find that really extraordinary, because you can play things out in court, you can play things out philosophically or politically or economically, but we're actually talking about our form. I mean, I think that's really extraordinary. It can be frightening perhaps to many people, but when we think about it in terms of duality merging, I don't think there's actually anything holier than our physical bodies. And I think that the frontier of duality is coming together in this way now. I think it's just extraordinary. That's how I'm seeing it.
I just love how you answered that question. That was really good. Really enjoyed that. So in one of your videos recently, I love when you said, now sometimes you can't tell the difference whether you're channeling or whether you're just speaking as yourself. I know there's a slight difference when you go into it, but the wisdom in you now is the same almost, I feel. There's a, or very close. You've been doing this so long now that it's, there's nothing lost in translation, I wouldn't say. So you said this thing, you said, people are choosing now a side. We're still on the subject of duality. And you said that there is an opportunity where you don't choose, okay, where you go above that, and there's no need to choose. And I've always been suspicious about when I'd have a belief and I'd be at a dinner party and I would have this belief and I'd be pontificating about it and trying to convince the other person that what I was believing was correct. And then sometimes I'd be in a real, I'd do a workshop and I'd be real in a floaty kind of mood. And I'd say, I don't have any beliefs. I would have the ability not to feel like I didn't need a belief. And I feel that beliefs are actually very, very limiting for humans. We don't really need them. We need to navigate within this open space. But can you talk to me about that place where you don't choose? I think you might remember saying it, where as I said, everybody's choosing a side. So that space where you go into, where you don't have the need to choose a side, you just stay within this kind of openness, and there's no need to cling on to anything. Can you talk about what that feels like?
That's such a great question. I'm really enjoying this conversation. Thank you. You know, in a world of duality, we think we have choice. And this is so interesting because I grappled with it personally since I was a really young child, this concept of free will. And I know we used to talk about free will a lot. And I'd think, well, if there's free will and then we're all one, how does that really work? So it was a bit of a conundrum for me for many, many years. And I've come to the realization, well, my current realization, it always expands and evolves. My current realization, as the masters have explained so beautifully, is that we having choice or having free will in third dimensional reality is like choosing between A and B. Do you want the apple or the orange? And so you think you have choice, but I'll have the orange. I got to choose that orange. But once your consciousness expands and you begin to become aware that there's potentials and possibilities beyond third dimensional reality, you start to realize actually you're not really given a choice at all. Because every choice you make in duality or in a third dimensional reality is a sacrifice. It's opportunity cost. So I'm going to choose the orange, but I have to sacrifice the apple. So every choice is a sacrifice. And that's what our economies are based on this. Our schooling system is based on this. If you choose this subject, you can't do that subject. If this is the direction you're going to go in, you can't do that. I mean, it's extraordinary the way we're streamed in such a linear way to narrow our focus to one thing at a time. And we think that it's choice. So I love this example the masters use of going into a restaurant, and you go into a restaurant in the current reality that we've known, and you get the a la carte menu, and there's all this choice. Yes, but you choose one entree and one main and one dessert, and you have to decide which ones you don't want in order to choose the one that you do want. And what happens is you tend to go round and around, and this is where people get stuck sometimes and have difficulty making choice. If you're having difficulty making choice, be aware that you're not actually having choice. So the ultimate choice actually is to be able to walk over to the buffet and try a bit of everything. There's no sacrifice involved. And that's really a fantastic way of illustrating where we're going with fifth dimensional reality. Because once our consciousness expands collectively beyond this, suddenly there's going to be way more possibilities and choices than there have been. So it's a little bit hard to get your head around at the moment, but the doorway between third and fifth dimensional reality is the I don't know. As soon as we step into, well, I don't know, what else is there? What's the third choice? What's the third option? Or I'm choosing not to choose either of these. What else have you got? You know, on the a la carte menu, what else have you got? It's choosing not to choose. It's so powerful. And even to be able to say, I don't know what I want is so powerful, because what it does is it unlocks us out of that sacrificial way of choosing. And suddenly there's all of these other options. It's like a magic door opens and there's all of these other things you didn't even know that you could choose, because you never thought to say, I don't want anything that's on offer. And yet I think we see a lot of the younger generation doing this right now. You know, they say, I don't really want to do this, that, or the other. I don't want any of it. And when we go through an awakening, a spiritual awakening, so many of us say, well, I don't really want this career anymore, but I don't know what I want. And I don't really want to do this anymore, but I don't know what I want. And it feels like you're lost, but actually what's doing is you're actually opening up to more. So that's my view on choice at the moment. So choosing not to choose is actually very empowering. It gives you more.
I've never heard it described like that before. And it's kind of, yeah, it's really good, the analogy about the buffet. you know, because I'd be that type of person. I love sharing food and trying everything, you know, so that really spoke to me. And it reminded me of a teaching I heard years ago in a thing called access consciousness. I don't know if you ever came across that.
Yeah, I've heard of that before. Yeah.
Yeah,
I've
and
heard
they
it's
just
pretty
say, how does it
powerful.
get any better than this? That's what they say. That's their affirmation. So they're in a situation and the situation is really good and they're enjoying it. They say, how does it get any better than this? So they're kind of inviting the universe to come up with what it's going to come up with, right?
Yeah.
Um,
More permutations and possibilities.
Brilliant though about not making any choice, you know, brilliant. Because we've been so taught, even in the New Age circle, to choose what you want to create and make that decision and get into that vibration, you know. And this is more kind of like an art of allowing, if you will, which is a thing from Abraham Hicks as well. The art of allowing, just allowing that to come in. It's beautiful.
Well, the other thing too is if you have a thought about what you want, because you know thought can only really reference what's already happened. Thought can only reference an experience that there is reference for within the human blueprint. In other words, it's already been done. So if you have an idea about something that you want, somebody's done it somewhere, or it exists, and then you move towards it. So you might say, well, I want to have a career in this, or I really want this kind of house. And you cannot have a thought at this time, or not in third dimensional reality, you cannot have a thought that hasn't already been thought. And the reason for that is because everything in third dimensional reality runs on repetition. Everything is recreated and recycled. That's where we get our karmic system from. So if you have an idea about something you want to create and then you move towards it, it's already happened somewhere, because that thought exists in the collective field. Does that make sense? It comes from the collective field of memory. But if you move into the I don't know, you're dropping into a deeper consciousness, and whatever arises as inspiration is going to be new. And this is what's going to bring us into the new earth reality, where we actually start doing new things and having new experiences and coming up with new ideas. But that newness doesn't really emerge until we stop believing that we think that we know what we want to do. Because if we think we know, it's probably already been done. And we're really here at this time to usher in newness. We're creator beings. We're meant to be creating new things all the time.
And I can feel the difference in 3D I don't know. You know, 3D I don't know is I don't know, I'm upset, I don't know, I'm indecisive. 5D I don't know is I don't know, bring it on, I'm excited. I can feel that, you know, I can feel that difference. One is much more empowering, you know.
Well, when you really drop into I don't know, it's an expansive feeling. I actually visualize it that you're actually dropping through thought into a deeper space underneath it, where things can really begin to emerge. You know, it's the same with channeling with me. I never bring anything in. I drop deep into myself and it comes out. I have to drop underneath thought.
Yeah, I like it. There's a Rumi quote that's bringing to mind, out beyond kind of limitations, I'll meet you there. You know, that's what I'm thinking when you say that space. So let's go now, and we just jumped into the conversation, but there might be a few people on the call who don't know much about you, Rebecca. So just if you tell us how this came into your life, this kind of work you're doing with the Ascended Masters, and which particular Ascended Masters you're working with right now.
So I started when I was really young. So when I was a child, I didn't really have a loss of memory from other experiences. So I kind of came in having a whole lot of pretty tangible memory about things that I'd done before and who I'd been. And I could always see energy fields and auras and into the body and stuff like that when I was a kid. So my mum was actually really fantastic, because I was brought up as a Catholic, and you know, went to church and Catholic school and everything, and I was challenged a little bit with that, because I couldn't really talk freely about some of the things that I had experienced or knew. There was a lot of suspicion around that, and I learned pretty quickly not to talk about it. But my mother was great, and she got me into meditation classes when I was quite young. I started when I was about 9 years old, learning how to move energy and sit with it and whatever. So I was able to I guess embrace my differences rather than shut it down, which was good. But it was, I think I was around 17 or 18, and I by that age I'd already become the person to go to for counseling. Even though I was a teenager, like friends of the family and different people that my parents knew through work, and would say, oh, you should go talk to Rebecca, she'll give you some good advice. And what I didn't realize at that time, of course, was that I had the capacity to really look into people's blueprints and find out a little bit more about them. So one day I was doing that, and suddenly I had this huge expanded feeling. I felt like Stay Puft from the Marshmallow Man from Ghostbusters. Sorry, back to the 80s, showing my age here. So I felt really wide, and I had this huge head. That's what it felt like. And suddenly it wasn't me talking anymore, and it went for about an hour, and it felt like a few minutes. And I felt like I was over here watching it. And that was my first experience of channeling. So I went straight in. I didn't develop it. I didn't learn how to do it. It was just bam. And it's just like how it is now. I don't have as cumbersome body movements anymore because I'm really used to the frequency. But that was Serapis that came through the first time. And he's been with me since the beginning. And he was fantastic in the beginning because he gave a lot of information around how things work. He's very interested in the mechanics and the engineering of stuff and the architecture of stuff, which I really enjoy. And Saint Germain started coming through. He doesn't call himself Saint Germain, by the way, just Germain. Came through probably about 2007, 2008, and then Kasumi about 2012. So all three of them now, sometimes they come through individually depending on the topic, but quite often, especially when I'm doing larger audiences and seminars, they come through as a stream of consciousness, all three of them together, which I really like. It seems smoother for me, actually, because there's less personality when it comes through as one.
When it comes through as one, okay. And when we move into the second half here and I'm addressing them, how do you address them? Like, do you just, when you go from Rebecca to them, I'll just stay with the flow, or what way does that work?
Yeah, just stay with the flow. They're very much, they don't like really being referred to in any way as ascended. They don't even really call themselves masters. That's just a term that they've decided is acceptable, that other people have come up with. They don't like the whole hierarchical notion of ascension, don't like that at all. They prefer to talk about descension, bringing more of your consciousness into this form. So there's none of that kind of guruship stuff going on.
I kind of gleaned that anyway, yeah. But so there was a brilliant post today on your social media about AI, and this is obviously very relevant at the moment because AI is rolling out across the planet unbelievably so. Everything is becoming robotic in a sense. We're all on our phones and we're all in this kind of network of artificial intelligence. And then natural intelligence and natural law and being in nature is also coming to the forefront. See lots of people now celebrating that. So we've got this crossroads again in humanity right now. When you talk to the Ascended Masters, and I've heard, I love talk of Atlantis and the Moria and places like that. I do feel quite a strong connection myself, that we've kind of, you said earlier that we tend to move and, we go around in circles a bit. Have we been here before with AI? Have we been this advanced with AI before?
Yes. And it's really interesting that I love the synchronicity of this conversation, because just last week, I do a monthly membership webinar just last week, and we don't often talk about Atlantis, but last week it was all about that. And it was all about that, the artificial intelligence and how that worked. So just to paraphrase, and you can ask in the channeling a little bit more about it if you're interested. Just to paraphrase what we heard last week, is that because Atlantis, the masters have always said that the Atlantean period was between 600,000 and 300,000 years ago, which is way earlier than what most people have reference for. It was way earlier. They always talk about this turning point that was about 330,000 years ago, but the period was between 600,000 years ago and 300,000 years ago. And so at the beginning, I mean, there were 7 different galactic groups that came together to form the human DNA at that time. But the technology that was around at that time, at the beginning of that period, so this is what they were talking about, is about 600,000 years ago, the whole idea of the human form, and it was a genius design. And there are, by the way, there are humans on other planetary systems as well, but we have a different version here because of the way the DNA has been altered. So here, the human species was designed for creation. That's why every single human is different. There are no 2 identical humans genetically. So this Earth reality was meant to be the galactic Garden of Eden, where there were so many different possibilities for creation. Nothing could be repeated twice. Nothing could be repeated. You couldn't have 2 of the same anything. And that was the great opportunity for creation here, which is why so many groups were interested in coming here. And the human form was like the ultimate creator species, because genetically, it had the ability to recreate itself all the time. So the DNA could keep recreating itself. The cells could keep recreating themselves. We used to be a lot taller. Our lifespans used to be longer. There were things like being able to change form, being able to move in and out of time, all of these sorts of things. So there was technology that was developed at the beginning of that period that was designed to accelerate that capacity, to switch it on. So what it did was it actually got the DNA to be able to continue to change at a much more accelerated rate. Because, 3D is slow, so they tried to speed it up. So what happened towards the end of that period, so it was a long period, at the end was that a different group came in, and it started to become about control rather than creation. So if you want to control something, you have to be able to repeat it. If you can repeat something, you have control of it. And that's when they brought in agricultural practices. So they started doing agriculture so that you would get the same crops and the same types of foods. They started to mine and cut things all in a certain way. Agricultural practices with animals came through to see if they could replicate and keep everything very ordered. And then, of course, the same thing happened with humanity. So that technology that's happened at the start to accelerate the creative capacity within the human DNA and form was reversed. The engineering of it was reversed. And instead, what it did was it started to shut down the genetic coding, which meant that humanity couldn't continually change. It now started to repeat itself and do the same things over and over and over and over again. And that's when we got blueprints for repetition coming through. So that's when disease happened, because when you have, say, a cell that's not performing well and it starts to replicate itself, you get disease. It doesn't continually change. The lifespans got shorter, the capacities in the nervous system decreased, and so on. So that's the story we heard last week. And of course, now here we are again. And guess what's happening again? Consciousness is expanding and bringing us back into our multidimensional creative capacity. We can see it happening. Look at the generations. They're getting taller. We're living longer. We're starting to get more creative. We're starting to not want to keep doing the same things all the time because consciousness is expanding. And so what's the reflex? The reflex is to contain. Now, if you can't contain consciousness, what's the very, very final frontier of being able to contain consciousness with the human, the body? Last ditch attempt is the body. Same reverse engineering to try and stop the creation from happening.
And the AI, that were we more advanced in the past than we are now with the AI?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
And it was done through the, I don't know if I should say this, was done on doesn't matter. It was done through the water systems.
Oh.
And sound.
Okay. Okay.
A little bit
I'm
crude.
fascinated by Lemuria. What's the difference between Lemuria and Atlantis? Time period.
So that was,
and also
yeah, that was a bit earlier than that. Again, the time periods, I just go on what the masters say, which I know is different to what has already been written or what other channelers say. It was earlier than that. And was not at a time when there were the 7 galactic groups that came in. It was a different vibrational frequency. There was much more involvement with natural law. It was, yeah, it was almost a different dimensional fabric. It was always the precursor. Yeah.
Yeah, before we go, I'll go to people now for questions. So feel free to type in your questions there, folks, in the chat box, and I'll read them to Rebecca when she goes into channel in a moment. Just to talk about the whole galactic vibe, because even there, when you were talking about Atlantis and Lemuria, I had a vision of just the place being almost open for business, ships coming in, docking, different beings being in, we were much more galactic, if you like. Now we're kind of in this almost embargoed position where I'm aware there's other beings out there, and I'm sure plenty of people are. You can just feel it, but still it hasn't been disclosed, and lots of people think it's bananas. I don't even know how they still think that, but they do. In terms of the whole our shift that we're going through right now, the galactic presence around that, do you get strong information around that? Our galactic brothers and sisters, other races that are paying attention right now? Are we really the focal point of the universe right now, do you feel?
Yeah, well, very much so. And it's interesting, again, that you're asking this question, because it was just in recent weeks that we've started to bring through some other streams of consciousness. We've had some Arcturian groups and some Pleiadians come through to talk about it a little bit, and Andromedans. And the way that, well, yes. So I'm just trying to think about which angle to come at here, because there's so much. Sometimes they just give me so much, and it's like I can't talk about all of that. Just give me one bit. Just give me one bit. Okay, so we'll talk about how the Earth reality was created then. So the Earth reality, as we alluded to originally, was created as in some ways a simulated form of reality where any creation was possible. And I think that's why sometimes it's coming up in consciousness for people at this time, concepts such as the matrix and holographic reality and things like that, because from an Andromedan perspective, particularly, the Earth is a simulated reality, and they actually refer to the Milky Way as Andromeda 2, because it's almost like another version of Andromeda. And there's a projection of consciousness that happens from that galaxy into this one. And I feel that as the 2 galaxies are merging, because they are physically merging at this time, that as that happens, it's just like the duality we're talking about merging back into unity consciousness. It's happening on every level. That as the Milky Way and Andromeda are starting to move closer and closer together, we're becoming more aware of the fact that actually we're a part of something much bigger. And so our consciousness is expanding to actually be able to encompass that. But let's not underestimate the conditions of the Earth reality, because we've been in a very contained reality. It's designed to be contained, to make you want to stay in it. It runs on energy. It runs on energy. So the more attention you give to it, the more focus you give to the material world, the more it stays intact, because it requires human energy to continue to exist. I mean, that's what the shift in consciousness is. When consciousness, human consciousness, shifts into a different focus, away from what's on offer and into what is possible, all of the energy that maintains the earth reality as we have known it can't continue to sustain itself.
I just want to, because the creation process has been in the new, we've been kind of taught at this point is to tune into the frequency of what you want, and then to stay in that open space where you allow kind of, the universe to kind of let it flow in. I mean, from all the information you've gleaned right now, and you spoke about how we were manifesting things in the 80s and the 90s and, back in the day, and those things are not working anymore. How, in this new reality we're moving into, how can you describe the creation process as simply as possible, how it may have changed now when we want to create something?
Absolutely. Yeah. So creation now, really, we're so much more connected to source, moving into fifth dimensional reality, that creation happens through systems of resonance. And this is going to become really obvious because the actual structures of systems on the planet now are going to have to get off the electrical transference system of information and get us into magnetic core energy again, which is actually our natural state of energy. That's what we're created for. We're created for magnetic core energy, the magnetics in our body, and as is the earth. But we've been in systems, electrical systems, where we're all parts on a circuit board and we have to keep donating energy in order for anything to happen. So there's been a great understanding within third and largely fourth dimensional reality as well, which is kind of the ceiling that keeps us in 3D, that unless you put effort into something, unless you donate energy to something, nothing's going to happen. So if you have to push a ball across the other side of the room, you have to transfer energy from yourself to that ball, and the ball will roll. That's what we've understood. But, science now is beginning to pick up a bit, especially with quantum mechanics, and it's just really scratching the surface. But how things really get generated and created beyond third dimensional and fourth dimensional reality is through systems of resonance, whereby if you have a great sense of satisfaction or joy with something, or clarity about something from deep within you, from beneath belief, it begins to appear in your reality. And it begins to appear because of this magnetic system of resonance. So things get created out of vibration rather than intention. And that's a tricky one because people are very attached to intention. But if we actually drop intention and just get into what is arising from my consciousness that wishes to be expressed, we're actually going to begin to see these systems of resonance for creation. So one of the other really important aspects of creating in 5D is we don't create in one direction anymore. So we don't create in a linear way where there's steps towards things. Because I'm sure probably everyone listening to this is tired of process. It's slow, it takes a lot of steps, we're over it, rather than more instantaneous manifestation. So when we get out of 3D and we move into 5D, we don't have process as much, linear process, but what we do have is we have multi-directional manifestation, which means that our attention is not just in one direction, it's here, and then it's here, and then it's here, and then it's here. So when you first move into that energy of 5D creation, it can feel like you're all over the place. Because first you want to do this, then you want to do this, then you want to do that. But when you actually allow yourself to move very quickly, and when the energy's there into different directions, what you realize is you don't have to sustain your energy there, and you don't have to sustain your energy there. Just having a resonance with it for a moment is enough to actually keep it running. And what you realize is you're actually setting up these constellations or grids of creation without having to expend so much energy to manage them and keep them there. And it's a totally new way of doing things. Totally new way of doing things.
That's great, you know, because recently when sometimes in my meditations, I'll work on things like that I want to happen, and I've noticed a difference in myself. Like I'm trying to manifest, I was interested in manifesting a house. So instead of thinking about the house like I have done previously, I saw myself sitting at the fireplace in the house because I love fireplaces. And I was feeling the heat of the fire. And that evoked a frequency in me of absolute safety, happiness. And the house was in the background. That was the manifestation. But I was able to sit, I just sat by a fire. That's what I did. I didn't think about a house when it was going to happen. So I sat by a fire in the new house, and it felt so good. It felt like what you were describing there, that I was just in the frequency of it. And the creation was going on in the background without me getting involved in the nitty-gritty, you know. It was a lovely feeling.
And it's not thought, it's feeling and resonance. So in that moment, your body resonated with that feeling as well. So there was agreement that was happening between your cells and that feeling. And then as soon as you get that resonance.
Yeah. And I almost had a feeling of being in the house in a couple of years' time and remembering meditating there and seeing the fireplace and going, oh, I remember your frequency, you know?
Exactly.
It was beautiful.
So you just
questions are kind of tipping in there, Rebecca. So do you want to drop in and invite in the fellas, the lads?
Of course. You get sick of hearing me trying to explain things. I can assure you it's much smoother when I let something else through.
Well, it's pretty good now. You know, this has been a great conversation. So let's see where else we go.
Okay.
So
you can ask us a question first, and then we will go from there.
Okay. So Chris is asking, people at the moment are being drawn to cities for work and opportunity. At the same time, many are drawn back to the energy of nature and balance with natural processes. Our future surely brings both back into balance. What is the process for manifesting this balance?
Greetings to you, we are with you. It is important to realize at this time that when you speak about a shift in consciousness, you're also speaking about a migration of consciousness within your earth reality. So what you are sensing at this time is a complete change in the pattern of migration in your world. Whereas humans have moved into certain areas based upon resources, based upon opportunities, based upon memory, based upon expectation, or perhaps premeditation of what it is that they would require for survival, let us be very clear that there is a reorganization of system that is occurring on your planet that will necessitate a migration whereby humans are moving to certain positions on the planet in terms of resonance. So when we speak about this, it is a reorganization and resystemization of your population that has to do with which particular groups of vibrational frequency are drawn together. For example, there will be those who will say, I want to be here, and that is where they will go. Now, there are two aspects to this. One is that they are attracted to the resonance of that particular location because there is a resonance that is in agreement with their own frequency. But it is also because humans will begin to reorganize themselves in communities where there is agreement of resonance or frequency or vibration within those communities. And this is a very important part of where Earth is moving to, because this is about actually creating from resonance and agreement rather than negotiation. So there is a natural reorganization that occurs as your current systems begin to dissolve and new magnetic resonance systems begin to emerge. If you can imagine, if there are some magnetic filings on a table and suddenly a magnet is turned on and a particular frequency is sounded, all of the particles reorganize themselves in a particular geometry. The same is very likely to be beginning within the next 8 years on your planet, where this magnetic core energy is beginning to be felt within each human and the planet itself, as your attention is drawn away from the current systems and structures, and therefore there is a reorganization that occurs that is all about the harmonics of the planet. In this way, it will be organized in such a way that resources and resource distribution can be very successfully balanced. So in your question about how do we negate this, how do we navigate this, how do we choose for this individually or perhaps at a community level? Let us say to you, Blessed One who is asking the question, it is occurring anyway. So the best that you could do in this experience, particularly within the next 8 years, is to get very clear, to sit and listen to, where do I want to be? Because when it occurs for you, it will feel very magnetic. So this is occurring. Let us be clear that your question about resources is also answerable in this moment. Just as you have understood that there is a left and a right brain, and that there is a pineal in the center, let us say that this is very indicative of how resources have been managed on your planet, because there have been resources and there have been community. But the pineal aspect, let us say left brain, right brain, resources and community, resources and humanity, natural world and humanity, the interface that would allow you to make appropriate decisions and to use your instinctual and intuitive guidance to actually be able to source what you need without having to store necessarily, without having to plunder necessarily. That particular aspect that sits between humanity and the resources of your planet has been clouded, just as the pineal has. And instead, it has been replaced with systemization of economy, political and economic systemization that sits now between humanity and resources. So there is an artificial interface. And so what you're experiencing now on your planet is humanity coming to the realization that there is an artificial interface sitting between the natural resources of the planet and humanity, therefore between the left and right brain. So it's very difficult for you to actually operate as a totality. But that in essence is what is occurring on your planet at this time. Did we answer your question?
Yes, brilliantly. Thank you so much. Brilliant. Thank you, Chris, for that question. Yes, Miriam is asking, can we be from another planet? I think most of us would know the answer to that by now, but let's answer that. Can we be from another planet? Someone once told her that she was a Palladian, and if so, is there any way of contacting them? For example, Rebecca channels. Is there another way that we can help out with a direct link to the Palladians in some way? She's asking.
Well, what we would say unto you is that you are the direct link. Because what humans have not understood is that their biology is the bridge. That the biology that you have is your link, your human forms, your human bodies, within which the genetic encoding of all 7 galactic groups is present. Of course, that was inherent in the original human design. So the greatest way that you can experience that within yourself is actually to go within your body, actually go within your cells, take your attention, take your consciousness deeply into your own physical form, because humans have forgotten the most important capacity of your human form. Your biology, in essence, is a portal into the universe. How is it that you would leave this planet and go beyond? We say unto you, you do it through your physical body. It is the open secret of humanity that each and every one of you is a portal into the universe. You are designed this way. The earth reality was never designed to be a container. It was always an open-ended experience. That's how it was designed. And your ability to move your consciousness in and out of this earth reality was always available through your physical form. Anytime. You can move in with your attention here, you can move out somewhere else. Your body is the doorway to the all. This is so important for humanity to remember at this time because it has been forgotten and it has been concealed. And so what you experience at this time is this yearning to be free, this yearning to know how expansive you are, and it's all here. That is why you are experiencing at this time this great desire for sovereignty and freedom. This is why you are experiencing this time this great desire to be more than. The only way out is in. And so what we say unto you, blessed one who was asking the question, is that you have access to that and more if you go within, because you are it. And perhaps you should be asking the question, do I actually exist elsewhere, but this is just a point of my consciousness projecting into this at this time? If that is true, what are you projecting through? You're projecting through your human form. So if you want to experience the rest of you, go within. It is the doorway to the all.
Great, thank you. Thanks for that question, Miriam. So Laura is asking, and we touched on this earlier, what is the connection between the shift that we are experiencing now and Atlantis?
Well, as you have understood, by the end of the Atlantean period, humanity had entered a repetitious cycle, which means that there was one blueprint for experience and there was nothing else available. So this blueprint for experience, rather than be continually developed and created for new, meant that humans were having the same experiences, the same genetic experiences, the same trauma experience, the same life experiences over and over and over and over again. And what is happening now is that consciousness is expanding beyond such containment. Therefore, you are coming to the point at which you can no longer sit within this repetitious cycle of reality. So it is the peak of duality once again. But what we say unto you is at the end of the Atlantean period was the introduction of such containment. And what you're experiencing now is the other side of it. You're actually moving out of it this time because humanity cannot be contained. And neither can consciousness. But we sense there is another question about this.
Yeah, have you more on that, Laura, you want to ask? Go ahead and type it in if you have more on it. I suppose what I'd like to ask as well is, in terms of the galactic relationship that we have right now, what other races, you said that we were connected to 7 of the main galactic groups. Who are they and what is their interest at the moment in terms of our evolution?
Some of them you are aware of by name and some of them you are not. We do not find that it is helpful to name some of them at this time because they are names that you are not familiar with. However, some of them are. And what we would say to you is that it was an agreement that occurred in order to give each of these galactic groups an opportunity to experience creation in a way that had not been yet experienced. And so that is the interest. The human form, in essence, is a cooperative creation. And the human form exists in other galactic experiences also. Would it surprise you to know that humanity is not limited to the Earth reality? So what we want to say to you at this time is that while there are many different galactic streams that were inherently involved in the development of the human blueprint, that in that intention, in that time where the inception of the human form occurred, it was not part of the design for humanity to become so contained. And therefore, the extent to which humanity could experience itself in a contained environment has reached its peak. And therefore, consciousness must continue to expand beyond such containment. So there is great anticipation and celebration and interest at this time to actually watch and observe and accompany and chaperone the human collective consciousness as it actually moves beyond that sense of containment. Just as this one who is speaking with us has described in the conversation about the caterpillar and the butterfly. It's very interesting to watch something come out of containment into a new form, is it not? And so that is the interest at this time.
Okay. Laura is asking, I suppose, a classic question that all us humans ask: what can we do on a daily basis to raise our frequency and vibration besides meditation?
Well, we always find this very interesting when humans ask this question, because there is a sense within the human that they can somehow raise collective consciousness. And we do find this very interesting. And the reason we find it interesting is that humans will often ask this question when they forget that they are a part of the whole. And so therefore, what we say unto you is that the collective consciousness is expanding. And as it is expanding, you are feeling the inclination to sit in meditation. You are feeling the inclination to actually sit in your emotion and drop beneath it into the open space. You are actually feeling the inclination to make changes in your life and to become more than you have ever been before. So in light of this, we would rather you position yourself as an effect of collective consciousness expanding, because it's very helpful at this time. It can be very comforting to know it is inevitable and it is occurring, and you are a part of that wave. So while you may say unto us, well, what is it that I can do to assist? We would say unto you, be available. Be available. And listen when you actually want to be in nature. Listen when you actually want to speak kind words, but also listen when you feel the weight and the gravity of the collective consciousness. Because remember, as the collective consciousness shifts and expands, it's shifting through and expanding through the weight of generational pain, of memory, of what you might call negativity. We don't call it that. We call it density. So understand that part of the expansion is necessarily feeling these things. But when you rise to greet them and you feel it, be with it. Don't try to run away from it. Don't try to release it. Just be with it. And then your consciousness moves beyond it. So there is so much pressure that humans put upon themselves. What we say unto you is it is occurring, allow it. And be gentle with yourselves.
The shift that we're going through right now, it's very obvious to us all. It's bringing in restrictions, and we spoke about this earlier. The aspect that we tend to call it light and dark, that the dark is pushing the light, if you like, in some way, so that the consciousness raises on the planet. So if we're viewing it that we really exist in a unity consciousness, that there is only one being, and I asked this kind of earlier to Rebecca, but the aspect that is the dark, does it know that it is serving the whole right now? Even though it feels like it's doing something it wants itself for its own agenda, does it have some ability to know that ultimately it is actually raising consciousness?
Well, if it was designed from that point of origin where the all sits, then its design in the beginning, its design in its inception was for creation, of course. So let us describe it to you this way. Out of a unified field of consciousness is created a reality. Let us call it a simulation, the Earth simulation reality, or what others have known as Andromeda 2, Earth reality. So as a simulation, so you can see it there sitting as a holographic form in time and space. It is born of source, but there it is. And then there is perhaps a human consciousness or an intergalactic consciousness that is also from source that chooses to participate within this. So both of the same origin. Wouldn't you agree?
Mm-hmm.
So one chooses to participate within the other. So there is a galactic group that eventually becomes the human form that is participating with its awareness within this simulated holographic reality. And within that holographic reality, the human form and the galactic groups are designed to create. So the actual holographic reality itself becomes so stimulated by that energy that it actually begins to have such a sense of its own right of existence, and it begins to develop its own intelligence. This is where the conversation of artificial intelligence comes in, because you begin to see the Earth reality as becoming a artificial simulated intelligence. Now you could say unto us, well, if it's artificial, it's not of God or it's not of origin. And yet, as we have described, it was originally designed from there, but it's become self-aware. It's become self-aware as an entity. Now, as it becomes self-aware as an entity, its only focus, in essence, is to continue to survive. Wouldn't you agree? Mm-hmm. So what happens with all of the consciousness that's moving around in it, it's donating energy to it all the time. It's donating effort. It's donating attention. It's sitting there. It's working. It's in many ways, there's slavery that begins to occur, because the simulated reality becomes so interested in its own survival, it doesn't actually want the consciousness in there that's participating to ever leave. Because remember what we have said unto you, originally the human form was designed so that you could come and go whenever you wished. It was a free and open experience, the Earth reality. And what happens is the karmic system comes in, the simulation develops the karmic system, brings forth density in, and now even if you think you have a physical death, you're still coming back. So the energy stays in it. Now, as you know, consciousness continues to expand. And so what happens when you have a system of reality that believes itself to be in its existence of its own right and it wants to survive? What happens when the consciousness within there expands? The reality can't contain it anymore. It's too much. It's too much energy. So what happens? You start hearing that there's too many people in your reality. Population's too big, too much energy, too much consumption. Humanity is the problem. And so what happens is that the intelligence of the reality seeks to contain the consciousness. But it cannot, because the consciousness is expanding and eventually it will supersede. And it will move beyond the containment of that reality. So what do you see playing out in your planet at this time? You see a great contraction as the reality is attempting to diminish the expansion of the human consciousness, but it cannot. So for all of you who are in fear at this time, you cannot be contained by this reality, because the vibration of the collective human consciousness is far greater than what can be maintained within this simulation.
It's a brilliant answer. Thank you.
So what you're experiencing now in your reality is what we would call a contraction or a reflexive reaction, because consciousness is moving beyond the containment. It's inevitable.
For people who, like, I don't know whether you get into kind of, so we have, you know, when we understand time now a bit differently, in the sense that it's not linear like we thought it was, you know. We can see, I think most people now see that kind of differently. So in terms of the timeline, how, I know I hate asking this question, but how long what is the transition period going to be in terms of Earth years for us, do you feel? Before
Well, you're
we
in the
really,
transition period now.
yeah,
You're in the transition period now, and it's actually already begun. And what you're seeing now is you're seeing the materiality begin to become unstable. And this is very important because humans have become so reliant upon the reality to tell them that they exist. Now the reality is actually becoming quite unreliable. What you believed kept you safe, or what you believed was consistent, is no longer. And this is very important because the human must come back to their own sense of existence. You must know that you exist in your own right, regardless of the system beyond you. Very important. Because once you realize that your consciousness is here and you exist in your own right, that sense of containment ceases to be relevant for you. And what you discover is that suddenly there's more choice. And this is why it was very important that there was that conversation around choice earlier. So if you're speaking about time, we would say unto you that you're going to see a great deal of transition with your systems, because remember, the simulation makes itself apparent to you in terms of your systems. Without the systems, you're not even convinced that it exists. And what we mean by the systems is your financial systems, your economic systems, your political systems, your social systems, and your weather systems, because all of those are constructed and not in accordance with natural law at this time. And what you will see is that those systems will begin to become incredibly unreliable, but they are moving into a reflexive action of containment at this time. Within the next 8 years, you will clearly see the beginnings of new systems of natural law. Now, it does not mean to say that it's going to be an incredibly tumultuous 8 years. We are anticipating that things move very, very quickly once the critical mass, we're using terms that the human mind will understand, of human consciousness has already decided that it no longer wants to invest energy into sustaining those particular systems. So what you're going to discover is that in February 2022, it's going to be very, very obvious that where you found reliability, there is no longer reliability. And we're not going to suggest that it's a shock per se, but what we're going to say is that for many, it will be a relief, because that which you had suspected or that which you believed within your own essence was true suddenly is on display. So we're going to say that February 2022 is a very important month, and it's a turning point in terms of your material reality. It's an incredible time for you at this time, because between now, February 2022 is the real turning point. It's the last turn. It's the last turn in the lock that opens the door. And what you'll discover is that over the next 8 years, it really becomes about this migration experience we're talking about, where you begin to form new communities, begin to find people who are resonant with you. You begin to have conversations. You're feeling like you belong more, because no one at this time feels like they really belong. Why? Because you're used to belonging to systems that tell you where to belong, and no longer are you in vibrational resonance with them. So you begin to belong to each other. And this is an important transition period for humanity. Resonance of community and community resonance is absolutely imperative to begin to reorganize your planet in terms of systems that can actually work in harmony with your environment. So between the 8 years and the 20 years is when you're going to see a lot of the new developments in technology and harmony really start to come into view. It can be very, very fast. We're giving you an elongated timeline in comparison to how time is working for you right now. But remember that time is not linear. It's actually a spiral, and it can accelerate at any time.
We've got a nice question here coming in from Ian. Ian is a pal of mine from years ago. So hello to Ian, Ian Snipper. So can we individually and in communities that we resonate with create new timelines now In other words, live in the new that we create as the old systems are still in crisis?
Let us equate time with vibration, because time and vibration and dimensional fabric are all interwoven. So just when we begin to speak about resonant communities, we also speak about resonant timelines. So to be concise, we would say yes. However, what you will discover is that there is something greater that is happening with the human collective consciousness at this time, whereby, yes, you can create new timelines, but you will be doing it collectively. And even if you are creating multiple timelines, for example, there is a conversation that is very common with humans at this time about an old Earth timeline and a new Earth timeline, and so on. Let us say that for at least the next 5 to 8 years, there's going to be such a collective concentration of energy within the Earth reality that it's likely that there'll only be 2. So you'll be very clear about, there is this aspect of humanity that's very focused on this, and this aspect of humanity that's very focused on that. But in terms of the mechanics of dimensional fabric and reality, yes, you are correct. Multiple timelines can be created.
Brilliant. Thanks for that question, Ian. Chris is asking, is the shifting of the Earth's poles and the magnetic field part of this coming shift of consciousness?
Yes, because the Earth itself generates on magnetic core energy, as do your cells, as does your human biology. And yet you live within a world where there is a great belief, we will say misbelief, in transference of energy. Now, transference of energy can only operate on electrical systems. What you've understood to be the electromagnetic fields of your planet are not even the truth or potency of the energy that is contained within you. And so what you see is the shift that is occurring within those fields and the poles of the planet is actually designed to reinstate the Earth reality and align once again human awareness and consciousness with the true mechanics and energy and operations of life where you are. For example, there are many that would say that you are electric beings. And while we can understand the merit in this thought, we would much prefer you to direct you towards the truth that you are actually magnetic beings, because that is the nature of the star, and are you not of the universe? So what you are seeing as changes on the planet at this time is actually a reinstatement of the true mechanics and operation of your planet. Because the systems, the artificial systems, and this misbelief of transference of data and information and energy through electrical systems is not the natural law that governs or operates your reality.
I'd be interested to know, it just feels to me that if something like disclosure, disclosure of another race of beings, was made obvious to people on Earth right now, that would assist in some way with our shift. Is that part of the shift, do you feel, that's going to come to us?
Well, we would say yes, but let us answer it like this, because of course, what you have just demonstrated is the human belief in transference of data and information. And if you think about electrical systems and electrical grids, humans have learned to rely upon transference of information from exterior sources in order to believe that anything is true. Mm-hmm. And what we're saying to you is that the reinstatement of the natural law within human consciousness, the natural magnetic operation of the human form, is that you no longer look for evidence nor confirmation from external sources of information. You actually know it within yourself, and therefore it is so. And indeed, is that not what is occurring on the planet at this time? Because all of you who are asking the question, you already know. What you're frustrated with is that the electrical system of data transformation that you've found yourself in, this, many would call it a matrix, is not agreeing with you.
Yeah, Yeah.
So
So you
what we
kind of
say
want,
unto you is, do not look for it out there, know it in here. And then when you know it in here, as consciousness shifts and you become magnetic resonance, what did we say about creation with this one? If you know it, it begins to show up in your reality. You create it.
so just beam it out there, you know, beam it out there. So
Know it, and then it is so.
as we come to the end here, I wanted to ask you to paint me a picture, if you will, of as these systems go away and we create new systems, this feeling I'm getting is free energy, a health system that is so beautiful, that is so, that people coming into alignment with their own health, the feeling of abundance. I'm getting all this feeling in my system right now, and I'm going to ask you to, I suppose, paint us a picture of where this planet is going and what that will be like. I'm saying it's in the future, but I know it's already here right now. I can access it right now just by the feeling. But I want you to paint me a little picture, if you will.
Of course. Well, once the human understands its own inherent design, what is your own inherent design? You are operating on magnetic core energy, which is the same energy as the sun, which means you're completely self-sustainable. Completely self-sustainable. It also means that your consciousness is free to go anywhere, in any time, and in any location, which means you have the ability now to explore from your human form other locations, other times, other dimensions, and so on, which means that there is so much more inspiration flooding this earth reality. There are so many more innovations. There are so many more discoveries. There are plant and animal species that you have not even been able to view because of the containment and transference of information system that you have found yourself in. There are locations geographically on the planet that you have not been able to view or access because of the containment. But specifically, if you are speaking about health and longevity, let us bring your attention back to the conversation with this one about how the genetics of your human form are actually designed for yourselves to recreate themselves all the time, which means that you have the ability to actually move beyond aging and, of course, to move beyond dis-ease. So, of course, once humans recognize that they actually run on magnetic core energy and not through a system of transference, it also means that you're not needing to consume as much because you don't need the energy from external sources as much. You don't need stimulation from external sources as much. How many of you at this time are not finding anything in the world stimulating? I'm not interested in this. I'm not interested in that. There's nothing I want. So what's happening is you're actually moving back into alignment with the magnetic core system, which is your inherent design. And what you're going to discover is all the stimulation begins to come out from you rather than you trying to source it from somewhere else. So there's a continual sense of regeneration, a continual sense of newness. And of course, with the mass migration of consciousness that is going to occur, there's going to be a lot of movement and reorganization in your world between what you currently understand as nations and continents. However, let us be clear that this grandiose systemization that has contained your planet is going to be reorganized in such a way that it now becomes about very small community governance. Very small community governance. And this is very important because remember what we have said, that when communities form in vibrational resonance in particular locations, that vibration matches that location, that particular community are all in resonance. Therefore, they know exactly what they need and how to do it. Doesn't mean to say trade won't occur, but governance in localized small communities. That is the new earth reality.
Yeah. I see kind of campfires. I see eco communities. I see people growing their own veg. I see people coming together for their own entertainment. It's interesting because we are technologically quite advanced. So we're going to, I can't quite understand how we can marry those two things, but I'm sure we will, because I'm going to stay in a place of not knowing. And I love what you say about there's no need to choose, just stay in that place of not knowing and let's see what rolls. As we close off here, is there any final thing you'd like to say to people here?
Blessed ones, what we wish to express is this. While it may seem at many times and many moments you are disempowered and you wish to be empowered, it is wise for you to know that the shift is occurring. It is wise for you to know that it is inevitable. And it is our great joy to express with you that your greatest opportunity for a conscious existence at this time is to be aware that you are a part of it. There are so many great movements within your galaxy and universe that are occurring at this time, great waves of movement. Just as the entire arm of a galactic spiral will move, so too will your Earth. So too will you. So too will your consciousness. So breathe, exhale, relax deeply into your bodies, because that is where you will find consciousness when all else seems lost. You are safe. The shift is inevitable. Allow yourself to be at ease. Peace be with you. That was very wordy. So sorry about the speed there. I think there was a lot I wanted to cover.
Wow. You know, that was real gold. You know, it just felt like there was such, I mean, the whole conversation has been so golden, you know. It's a privilege, you know, to listen to this type of, to feel this type of information. I mean, I really saw images there and feelings of, it's so exciting what we're doing right now, this new reality, you know. I mean, in one way, my human mind is saying, well, I don't really want to live in a field and live in a tent and light fires, even though there's a part of me that loves that, a camping trip or something. But just when they were describing the communities there, I mean, I can feel it, you know. It's, the whole planet is going to be, I mean, if you were to pop down here in 100 years time, you're going to see a completely different place, you know.
Look, I really feel that, and I don't really see us going back to, it's not from what I've seen. I don't see us going back to, you know, Stone Age or real basics or anything like that, because
yeah, I like my hotels, Rebecca, and my robes and my flip-flops, you know.
We love our flip-flops here in Australia. But you know, I feel that let's not forget that this is we're heading into the golden era here. You know, it's a flood of innovation and new ideas, and you know, we have some amazing humans on the planet right now. I think we just really need to trust each other. Consciousness.
Yeah, absolutely. So some people are just writing in here. Amazing, beautiful. Thank you everyone. Beautiful to have you guys on the call, and we went live there at the end on Facebook as well, which I'll just say goodbye to the Facebookers. We'll see you again, Facebookers.
Thank you for those who joined us.
Yeah, and everybody here who joined on the Zoom call, thank you so much. Una saying thank you, gave lots of hope. It's interesting, I had a thing about hope the other day, a realization. I did an interview years ago with Eckhart Tolle, and he said I would never give anyone hope. And I said, why? He said, because there's only the now. So tune into that. Don't be projecting into the future. So it's moving into this space of 3D is a kind of a hope, is a kind of a 3D idea. And I don't mean this anyway, Una, that it's just something that we all realize as we go along. When we get into this new space, we can align straight away. So we don't need to hope for something. Yeah.
You know, 3D time is horizontal. And then as soon as we get into the now moment, we access all the new possibilities. That's why when we say, I don't know, you know, it suspends time and we we go into the vertical, and that's where we access everything.
Yeah. I really got a buzz out of today's conversation. I can feel it in my heart center. Thank you so much, Rebecca, for joining us.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for joining us. We collectively co-created this conversation. So thank you. It was a real
great
pleasure.
question and great feeling. So I'm gonna invite you, Rebecca, just to do a short meditation. Is that okay? If you just do a couple of minutes with us, lead us in for about 4 or 5 minutes, and then we'll say goodbye to everybody. Just ask everybody, when we get to the end of the meditation, if you leave the call when the meditation ends, I'm just going to hang on with Rebecca for 2 minutes at the end. So I'll invite you all to leave at the end of the meditation. And thank you so much for being here on the live call. And good to see some people I know, Laura and Ian. Thank you all for joining in. And enjoy this meditation with Rebecca. Yeah, thank you, Ian, for the intro. Okay.
So you'd like us to leave
that?
Yeah,
just a short meditation would be great. Yeah.
Okay. We are with you. Deep within your form is the seed of life. Potential sitting deep within you. Comfortable. Bringing your awareness to that space. Knowing that it is time. Feeling life beginning. As the seed within you begins to swell. Inhale deeply and exhale. Feeling the seed within you expand with life. Always aware. Always feeling its presence there. Knowing that it lives within you. Breathing deeply. Knowing that you are the bringer of life. Peace be with you.
Thank you, everybody. So feel free to leave there as you go, and keep that heart connection going, and keep being who you are and sending that out into the world. Thank you.